Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to the Artsy Raven podcast. I'm your host, J.F. Garrard, and today's episode is called Selling Books Made Easy, an Insider's Guide. And we will be speaking to Chris Houston, the marketing guru of The Idea Shop. So Chris is a 20-year publishing industry veteran and book lover who has worked as a marketeer for some of the biggest publishers in the world, including Penguin Random House, Scholastic, and DK Publishing. He is now the driving force behind The Idea Shop, a one-stop shop for fresh new ideas on how to promote creative endeavors of all kinds, from books to podcasts. And The Idea Shop can be heard each month on Sauga 960 AM radio. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't we start a little bit from the beginning? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what The Idea Shop is?
Well, The Idea Shop is the culmination of, like you had said, I've been in publishing for over 20 years, and I was always the ideas guy. Whether it was an idea that was going to happen in a year or an idea that needed to happen the next day. I seem to be good at ideas, and in publishing, that's about finding ways to connect a book with an audience. And how do we get it out there? There's lots of books, many of them I own, many of them you own, probably. We all have lots of books. Why would we buy another book? Even if it's a topic we love, we probably have, I probably have, 20 books on mythology. I'm going to buy another one. Yes, I am, but it has to be special. It has to stand out. And so I'm really, I've been always sort of the mind of the consumer when I'm doing my marketing. And the Idea Shop is a chance to put 20 plus years of marketing experience into play for someone who has a book that they've published, or a publisher who it simply needs an extra hand with something, and in some cases even authors who have written books but want to write another book and aren't sure how to put it all together. I've been on all sides of that. I've worked in bookstores. I've worked over 15 years at Indigo, Chapters, Kohl's, and so I've been on the retail side. And then the other half of my working career, I've been on the publishing side. So I'm kind of in a unique way poised to help people connect book with reader. And in some cases, I do stuff other than books as well. The Idea Shop is a great place to take an idea and give it life, find an audience, and help it get to where it's going.
So you mentioned a couple of places you worked at. So what were some of the most memorable experiences? I mean, you were doing marketing and you were also doing retail. So, I mean, maybe also, what are some of the differences in the whole this whole system that's going on with books?
Well, it's interesting. When bookstores started to get bigger, and your local bookstore at the corner took out a shelf of books and put in a couch and a coffee shop, and the whole nature of the bookstore started to change a bit. It became much more of a place where people could congregate and really, I've loved bookstores since I was a little kid. There was one at the end of my street. They kind of let me work there from age 10, I'd go behind the counter and help people I love connecting people with books. And the really good people I worked with in my many years there, they loved the same thing. They would love you to come in and say, I'm looking for a great book. What do you suggest? A lot of people don't think of doing that. They come in, they have their list, and I was told this was the book I should get, or I heard it on the radio and it sounded great, or I saw it on TV, so they know why they're buying it. But it's just a great place to explore. It's like, so I think that what I've learned, is people's passion for books really matters. There's a way of feeding that, both in kids, get them excited about reading, get them to find that book that sparks a lifetime of curiosity, and adults too. It's too easy. We're all of us around the world have been kind of indoors, not doing what we might normally do because of the pandemic or the lockdown or whatever. There's some great time to read and hit that bucket list of let's reread Dante's Inferno again. Always wanted to read that again. And what's neat is these books are different 10, 15 years later. So what I've learned at these different jobs is what connect people to books. What are the little hooks that make people buy this book and not that book, or want to learn more about this and not that. And I think that's really a special part of what not normally would be considered retail. Like you think of retail, we're just selling things, but I learned early on that there's more to it than that.
I think that sort of changed a lot over the years. I'm thinking of bookstores like before they're like, there are still mom and pop shops, but I think over time, like as people move online, there's a bit of a disconnect. Like it's not there anymore. Like who are you going to talk to on the website, right? I mean, maybe a chat box. I don't know.
Well, we used to spend a lot of time in the old days, the olden days, making really great piles of books at the front of the store. We call it the book pyramid. You'd walk into your store and there, Harry Potter, stacked as high as the ceiling. Not Costco stacks, but bookstore stacks. Very,
Mhm.
approachable, but they were almost like forms of architecture. And now, buying a book is like, you do this. And ta-da, you purchase it. So the way people buy books has changed, but what
Mhm.
gets them excited about it is the same. So in many ways, I regard it always as a real plus of the modern age. I know people could sort of, oh, social media, oh, the internet, but for us marketeers, what's interesting is we're spending a lot less money on things, and we're able to be a lot smarter about what we are spending, because when you're buying something on the internet now, there's ways of you can get this information right away. Back in the old days, you'd wait 6 months to find out that you didn't sell any copies of a book that you'd done a full page ad in the Globe and
Mm.
Mail for. So that was no fun. That was really, and now with the pandemic, the marketing that we were doing, most of it was online. So we'd launch a campaign on Monday, and on Tuesday we'd go, that's not working. We need something else tomorrow, like tomorrow, and so it was a very accelerated process, but very exciting. It's like we were waiting for this moment to flex our muscles. We were lazy before, so it's great times.
Oh, I don't think you're lazy, but taking a step back, what is marketing? Like, what is marketing in your opinion?
Well, marketing is a great way of I think, of putting the spotlight on something, saying this one. Let's look at this right now. It's kind of like when in school, your teachers would have a whole curriculum for you for the whole year. We're going to learn biology. They didn't give it to you all at once. They focused on things so that you could learn about them, appreciate them, and by the end of the year, your person sitting next to you might have been very enthused about one thing and you were enthused about something else, but it's because it was presented in a way that allowed you the sort of reflective time to get into it. And marketing is, I look at marketing as a very positive thing. I think it's a way of someone coming along, me, and saying, I have a lot of cookbooks, and you're spotlighting this cookbook. Why? What's different about this? Why is this exciting? Well, it's not always, the author isn't always the person who's best qualified to tell you why it's special. They will tell you it's special because they made it and they like it. But someone who's seen 10,000 cookbooks and sold 10,000 cookbooks is better poised to say, what's really, really special about this cookbook is, you don't need any fancy equipment to do anything in it. It's all stuff that's lying around. That's very exciting. If you're buying a science activity book for kids, the last thing you want to do when you get home is find out that you need a particle accelerator in your backyard to do half the experiments. It's very helpful to put on the cover of the book, which I told them to do in one case, uses common household materials like, paper towels. Yes, I have those. Soap. Yes, I have those. That's very, but that's buried somewhere. Sometimes it's not even on the book jacket. It's not in the description online. It's, so that would be like a big selling feature that kind of someone has to come along and say, what's special about your book is this. And the author probably never even thought of that. They're like, my mom helped me write a chapter.
Well, the author's too close to the book, right? Like it's almost like they're so in the weeds, they don't step back and look at the bigger picture sometimes. So
That's it. That's
yeah.
it. It's hard for the authors. The authors are the creative force. Nothing happens without them. We must respect the fact that the creative force may not feel like getting up at 6 a.m. and doing a live radio interview on CBC. I mean, they probably will. They'll do it because it's CBC and all that. But it doesn't mean they're going to be great at it. And they may be having a bad day and really were happier the day the books arrived in the box, and they're like, yay, this was the best moment. For other authors, the CBC interview is like the pinnacle, but it's a bit different. And there's, some of, when I'm working with authors, some of it surprisingly is making the interview okay for them. Like, why am I doing this again? Well, so now we're not even on the book, we're on the, like, just trying to make it okay for everybody. I'm trying to help them realize what, this is nice. This will be a fun way for you to talk about this thing that's been occupying your household discussions for the last 3 years.
So when a client contacts you, what's the process? Like, you have a consultation with them, and then you guys go off, or?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's always nice to connect with someone, especially if the book is fresh. I had a conversation this morning with someone who, like, literally finished their book yesterday and wants to know when the marketing started. The book's not even printed yet. But I like that. This is like, it is fresh. It is not like, what was that thing I did last year? The space between creating something and promoting it is actually quite long. So the first conversation is, like, who did you have in mind when you wrote this book? So if you had in mind, like, a large group of, like, it's a book aimed at, readers between 35 and 50, and, that's your target audience, great. Let's put together, I don't want to waste anyone's money. I'm going to do, freelance marketing and promotions. I don't want to waste money. I want to go for where they think this should go. But sometimes, in some cases, I get involved after that's already happened. In one case, one of the cookbooks that I was working on, the publisher had done all the good stuff, great stuff, fantastic PR, but there was a whole avenue that they had pursued of, parents at home cooking. Now, we've been cooking at that point for 6 months at home. Food was not getting more exciting. It was getting less exciting because we were now out of things to cook, and the restaurants were closed, and maybe even the place we would buy our special food wasn't happening. So what we did is we made a real strong 1 month promotion just to, parenting bloggers, family writers, people who, for whom food and cooking is part of life, but who not traditionally would do a fancy, interesting cookbook, but they embraced it. It was great. Sales went up 36% in 2 weeks because here's a huge untapped market. So that would be something that I would look at too, is maybe round one is all the things the author thinks should be done, and round two I come in for a second hit of, like, okay, your book's been out for a little while now, let's see, is there a group that maybe has been overlooked that you weren't thinking of, but that, with my, expertise and my connections, I can go, well, let's try this. And, and generally it usually works very well, I have to say.
It's very interesting you say, like, you're doing round two, because when people think about book releases, it's usually the round one, and the publisher does all the marketing. It seems like that's it. Like, I don't know if I ever see any promos for this book ever again, right?
You're absolutely right in thinking that. I know why, because I've worked at the publishers, and I had 350 books coming out every year. You couldn't really spend 2 months on every book because I'm not great at math, but that's like 700 months promoting, books. But certain books are better promoted at certain times of the year. Everyone's trying to get everything to come out in September, October, November, because Christmas is a huge book buying time. That's when, I'd say 60, 70% of the books being sold are happening in that juncture. But that leaves leaves March and April kind of up for grabs. Like, what's going on in March and April? So right now, there's not the fight in the marketplace for, the kind of topics and subject matter. You might have written a book that's not like a gift type book. It's just a good story, or it's a good novel, or it could be a book of poetry, or it could be, something that would, you wouldn't necessarily earmark as a Christmas or holiday present. So now is a great time, and this often gets overlooked, because they'll move on to, it's spring, let's get the gardening books out. But, people want to read a good novel. Let's do some novels in February, March when it's too cold. I'm letting the dog walk himself now. I'm going to stay inside and read. As long as he comes home, we're good, So there's a chance to take advantage of things that it gets overlooked in the day-to-day business. So I come on, I am the champion of your book. I take it on. I usually work with a sort of 4 to 6 week program, and it tends to be that after we've done that, it usually goes very well. Happily, I get engaged for another round. Like, what else? What other tricks do you have? And that's very satisfying.
So I was going to ask, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see when authors market their books in general? Like when you look at other people doing marketing.
Well, I've never really, book publishing isn't a huge, unless you're like Stephen King or something, there's not huge dollar signs attached to it. So it absolutely pains me to see an author or even a publisher spending money on something that is not going to have a winning effect. It might have some effect, but not necessarily what you paid for it. So, in 20 years of book marketing, my budgets, when I was working at the big publishing houses, the budgets go down, but the amount of stuff I was doing was going up. So we were getting smarter at making use of, we got social media, and we got, ways of doing digital things that are a lot cheaper than the traditional, there's an ad in the newspaper. So when I talk to authors, what I find is hard is in their minds, they have an idea of how this book will be promoted. And it would make them very happy to have a full page ad in the Globe and Mail or, Maclean's magazine. But the reality of things is, a full page ad in the Globe and Mail is like $15,000 to $20,000. It's, that's too much. You would have to be selling books. You can put 10 books in the ad, maybe. That's one trick we used to use to make it okay. Oh, it's in there. It's this big. So it's more about finding the right place for things that is affordable, that is good bang for the buck, and recognizing that the author, if they want to be involved, there's a great way for them to be involved. But sometimes it's better if it's not them. You don't really want the author. An author has written the book. You don't want them having to call up, "Hi, I wrote a book." Media get very uncomfortable with that. Media would rather work with someone that they know and say, "Hey, you say it's good. Looks good to me. Let's put it on the air. We'll see how it goes." That's the phone call that makes me happy. It's like, "Chris, whatever you say, you've been good to us. You haven't let us off down the wrong path. We'll go for it." And then there's some you have to work a little bit harder for, but there's no use in spending money and energy booking yourself on a book tour across Canada if you're going to be, sitting in a room with 2 or 3 people. That might be nice in and of itself, but then you'll be exhausted and you won't want to do something else that actually could reach more people and have more effect. It's actually cheaper and easier. So that's always a little, something I always look out for with the authors.
What are some of the strategies you think some authors could use that are like relatively inexpensive, I guess? I mean, I'm just thinking about the indie authors and the publishers that don't have much money.
Well, from 2 angles, the publishers and the authors, publishers sometimes fail to realize what cachet they have as a group. So they're publishing these things and they're very individual, but there's a certain power, having just mentioned how you get away with a full page ad in the Globe and Mail and make it make fiscal sense, put a whole bunch of books in it. But there's ways of grouping things together, even in a publisher. Why don't we have this guy talking about that author's book? So 2 authors, they've both written books. Why don't we mix and match them? Like that's exciting. 2 authors talking. Who wouldn't want to be a fly on the wall for that? Some authors have figured this out during the pandemic. HarperCollins has a mystery book author, Hannah Mary McKinnon, and she's lovely, and she has like this ongoing series online where she kind of picks a co-pilot and they each read bits of each other's books. It's great. So I think for publishers, they need to take advantage of the wealth of opportunity that their company has. It's not even money. We're talking about like using the website or pairing 2 books up, or it's Valentine's Day. There's ways of just putting it again. It's the same thing. We're always talking about trying to push something out there so that it stands out. Not every day for 365 days, but Dundurn Press has a book called The Toronto Book of Love. Great, there's lots you can do with that. Valentine's Day, Toronto, so it's about exploiting all those different angles. Now, for the authors themselves, gosh, if you're an author who's wants to do stuff, there's that kind of author who's like, every day that I'm sitting at my desk not writing, I'd rather be promoting my book. There's so many ways to get engaged online. People are shocked that they're communicating with the author of a book, even if they haven't read the book. You've written a book. I mean, it's like a great trick. What do? Oh, I've written a book. But they've poured their heart and soul into something, and I think people recognize the obvious value in that, and they can create a great online community just by 15 minutes a day going online, commenting. We come up, even as a marketing person, I can come in. Here's a couple of hashtags and some people to talk to. Never underestimate a good contest. People love a contest. It could be gift cards. It could be books. It could be, and I always find publishers are very like, oh, contest. It's a lot of management. It's not really. When I worked at Chapters, we did a contest to win a cruise with Dick Francis, the now sadly passed away author, but it was worth $25,000. It was great, and we had entries from all across Canada. We probably had about 10,000 entries, and that was exhausting. I made one mistake too, is I had the stores send all the entries to the office. Like later on, I learned I had a room filled with entries. It was just floor to ceiling. The recycling trucks had to come in. Later on, I figured each store should draw one winner, and that way I only had 300 entries. So there's a tip for any store manager out there. But so Dick Francis's thing was great. It was a huge hit, highlight of the year. But sure enough, the day it ended, 48 hours later, my boss is at my office saying, "What are we doing next?" Well, I spent all my money. I had no money left. That was it. It was like October. I'd blown everything. I didn't know she was going to ask for something else. Who would do that? So I looked around and I found some hats. We had hats, Chapters hats. We'd use them at a baseball game or something. So we did a contest for Chapters hats, just hats. Probably retail value of each hat, $19 max. That's if we uptick them. You could probably get them at Costco cheaper. But we had 75% of the same number of entries for hats as we did for a cruise with Dick Francis. And I realized, you don't need to have a big, crazy prize. It's not like, the Price is Right. You don't need to have a car every time you give away a hat, or 5 books signed by the author who came by the office looking for the royalty check, something like that. So there's a lot that can be taken advantage of if you get yourself out of the sort of there's a big routine in publishing of, okay, we're just going to, here's the next book, let's do things, send it to the same 10 people. And another tip, just because I'm not in the mood for tips today, I always would include a handwritten note. And even I have pretty despicable handwriting, but you get a sheet of paper touched. This is pre-COVID, mind you. You get a sheet of paper touched by a human being. That's very nice. Oh, look at this. I don't know what it says, but someone wrote me a note. Like that's cool. Yeah, I got a few emails back from people saying, "Thanks. What's this say exactly?" It looks like it says eggs and milk. It's at your shopping list. No. It says enjoy the book. That's it. But and if authors, if they're usually a little bit time challenged, but if they do a little book plate or something, or even 50 notes to your top 50 reviewers and bloggers, it's so nice. It's such a human touch. Love that.
Okay. Now I want to ask you, because you talked about you worked in marketing in Canada, but I think at one point we were talking about Canada versus US. What do you think the difference is? I mean, obviously US is such a bigger market. It's just a different beast, but I'm curious to know some of the differences you think in the book markets between the two.
Well, you're right. And you're describing it as a different beast. I always describe it as a different feast. It's kind of like in Canada, you'd put a beautiful dinner together and invite 10 people over, and you'd have a nice time. And, maybe 2 people would fight, and someone would leave early, and someone would come that wasn't supposed to be there. But it was nice. In America, in the United States, that party feast is like 1,000 people. And there's the same amount of food, but 1,000 people. So it's very scrappy, and no one has the same amount of time. So unless someone like sees exactly the food they're looking for, oh boy, Pop-Tarts, I love Pop-Tarts, and they go in for, unless you have exactly what they're looking for, you don't hear anything. And there's no I mean, there's no real disrespect to it. It's just silence, silence. Canada, you know, generally, again, we're really nice Canadians. We're good people. Sorry, no, thank you, or you know, maybe not right now, but you'll get, you know, you'll generally get something back unless you're dealing with some very, very high pressure people. So so in America, you often don't even know where you stand, you know, unless you get a bounced message, or, you know, in the era of phone calls, unless, you know, you've left 3 messages, you don't know. So it's harder to get, you know, we're talking a lot of effort, but if you get something in the America, if you get it, it's huge. And so in that way, it's bigger than any 5 things you could do in Canada if you're just interested. So it's a very different mindset. So if an author or, you know, comes to me, specifically an author, because, you know, I know that market, they come to me and they say, oh, I want to promote this in the US. You know, it's going to be a little bit more money. It's going to be more time, and the expectations are going to bring them way down, you know. So, you know, pitching someone to Oprah for the magazine, you know, I mean, I've got 20, I know 20 people who work at the magazine, but, you know, unless I have exactly what their boss was looking for, you know, not this month. The good news is about America, though, the speed of things is so quickly, you know, you can pitch something 3 months later and they're like, fantastic, this is great. Like, I said this to you in January. Oh, well, you know, the boss walked in and he said this, or she said this, you know, so.
So what kind of advice do you have to authors that are scared of marketing? Because I've talked to people and they're sort of like, well, we wrote the book. Like, why do we have to do any marketing? People will come. And I'm like, I don't think it's as organic as you think it works, you know? So.
No, it's, you know what, it's mean. I'm gonna be very un-Canadian here. I gotta say it's mean of the authors to say that. It's like keeping a secret, you know? One of the guys I was talking to, he creates games, not online games, but classic board games. So I said, look, this is your time. You know, people are home and they've played Risk and Monopoly and the Game of Life a million times now. We need something new. And he's got some great stuff. So I'm like, this is fantastic. But I said, well, why are we talking about, how long have you been sitting on these games? He said, oh, you know, like a couple of years. I'm like, you're keeping it secret. You're withholding it from us. So if you've created a book, you've created anything that is creative, it deserves an audience. I mean, that sounds a little hokey, but it really does. And I get it totally. You're a creator. You're exhausted. No one else can do what you did. You created something that only makes sense to you, and you put it forth in a way that everyone can share and enjoy. Take a nap. Hire me, and let me do the talking. As you can see, talking not a problem. And like, let me figure out what it is that is really going to connect with people this time. If we're in America, 3 months later, I can find something else. Let's talk about, you know, there's one chapter in this book that talks about, you know, one of the great books that I did is a book called 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. And she's a comedian, but now she writes about mythology. And she did a book on the Trojan War, but from the perspective of all the women characters. Well, this is a great idea. Now, she has no trouble talking about the book, and she's a former comedian, so she's funny and she's smart, and the characters are, you can imagine, women of mythology. Who would not want to get invited to that cocktail party? It would just be off the hook stories and gossip and, you know, good kinds of fighting, and maybe even an arm wrestler or two. I mean, these are heroic characters. So I loved this book. It was like, you know, the Trojan War, we all know enough about that to get past the big wooden horse. The big wooden horse is not that important. What's important is these women are waiting for their husbands to come back from war. There's goddesses fighting over who's better looking. It's like Kardashians in Greece. You know, it's so compelling, and I think that me talking about it, who is clearly not a woman, and you know, you'd be less likely for me to push a wild feminist agenda in a conversation. I am simply responding to how freaking amazing this book is, and how fun it is, and how I want everyone, boy, girl, I want my 13-year-old son to read this book as he's covering mythology, because I'm like, look at how real this is. So this is a great thing. The author's definitely going to be a great interview, but on another side, there's this guy talking about this book of women of the Trojan War. Like, that's kind of interesting, because it's again, I'm being very genuine. I mean,
I think you're so enthusiastic. I think it travels with you and it shows in your work. Now, one last question is, where can we find the Idea Shop and you if we're interested in getting you to help us be our champion?
Well, we are at the ideashop.ca online. That's all the links are there. We're on Instagram, Idea Shop Canada, and Twitter as well, the Idea Shop CA. But if you go to the website, theideashop.ca, all my contact info is there. You'll see the faces and words of some of my clients who are very pleased and delighted. So it's a great first step for anybody who's got, I have something, I want to share it. Maybe I could benefit it. We're good at small things. We're good at big, we've done big things. I've got one client I've had since the first day I opened, and he's sticking with me because we keep finding new ways to promote his book, which is great. And, I'm always looking for new stuff. I've taken on a podcast based on a fascinating love triangle between Sherlock Holmes, Moriarty, and Moriarty's sister. And it's created out of Montreal. It's called Genius Podcast, and it's very, very cool. We pitched it to Netflix. Very exciting. So so it's very. There's always stuff to be done. So I'd love to hear from anyone.
Awesome. So thank you very much, Chris, for being on our show.
Thank you.
And yeah, and hopefully we'll speak again at another time.
You bet.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
For more upcoming episodes of the Artsy Raven about writing and publishing, visit us at jfgarrard.com/arpodcast. If you enjoyed the show, you can show your appreciation by buying us some digital coffee. The Artsy Raven is produced by J.F. Garrard. The voice in the show's introduction is Chris Corman, and music is by Tim Moore. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe.